They pulled her over, planted drugs in her car, and laughed as they locked her up. What they didn't know, she was a DEA agent, and she was about to turn their world upside down. The late afternoon sun blazed across the horizon, casting long shadows over the two-lane highway, stretching through rural Georgia. Monica Trenton tapped her fingers against the steering wheel of her black Dodge Charger, eyes flicking between the road and her rearview mirror. A long day in court as a key witness in a federal drug case had her itching to get home. But something felt off. A black and white patrol car had been tailing her for the last 5 miles. No sirens, no lights, just lingering. She kept her speed a steady 55 miles per hour, the limit posted every few miles. A slow exhale. She knew the game. In her years as a DEA agent, she had encountered small-town cops with too much ego and not enough oversight. Some of them got their kicks from stopping out-of-towners, flexing their power over people who didn't know better. But Monica knew better. Then, just as she predicted, the red and blue lights flicked on. "Here we go," she signaled, eased onto the gravel shoulder and shut off the engine. Both hands stayed on the wheel. She'd trained agents on how to handle stops like this. Stay calm, stay in control, give them nothing. If you think Monica is handling this situation like a pro, hit that like button and share this video. Let's spread awareness about real-life corruption and injustice. 2 officers approached from either side of the car. One was tall and lean, sunglasses low on his nose. The other was stockier, mid-40s, his belly stretching the fabric of his tan uniform. Their badges gleamed under the fading light. The tall one, Officer Ryan Whitmore, tapped the driver's side window. She rolled it down slowly. "Evening, officer." "License and registration," he said, voice clipped. She pulled them from the center console and handed them over. Whitmore barely glanced at them before speaking. "You in a hurry, ma'am?" "Nope. You didn't see that stop sign a few miles back?" Monica's expression didn't shift. There was no stop sign. Whitmore's mouth twitched at the corners, amused. "Step out of the vehicle." Here it was, de-escalation. Monica kept her posture relaxed, her face unreadable. "On what grounds?" "We'll discuss that outside the vehicle." A slow exhale. She unbuckled her seatbelt, stepped out carefully, and shut the door behind her. The gravel crunched under her boot. The second officer, Cole Barrett, circled behind her, hands resting on his duty belt. "Turn around," Barrett said. Monica tilted her head. "Excuse me, turn around, hands behind your back." Whitmore took a step closer. "You got drugs in that car, don't you?" Monica almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "You're joking, right?" Neither of them smiled. "I'm a federal agent," she said, voice steady. "My badge is in my." Barrett grabbed her wrist. She snapped her arm away. "That's assault on a federal officer." Whitmore's grin vanished. "Lady, I don't care who you say you are. We got probable cause. You fit a description." "A description?" If you think Monica is about to turn the tables on these corrupt officers, comment 1 below. If you disagree, comment. And if you have no opinion, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to rvmblackstruggles so you don't miss stories like this. Monica held his gaze. She knew exactly what that meant. Whitmore turned back to her car, tapped on his radio. "Dispatch, we got a suspicious vehicle. Possible drug transport. Requesting K9. This wasn't a routine stop. They were setting her up. Barrett's hand hovered near his taser. "We're not gonna ask again." Monica's pulse remained steady, but her jaw clenched. She could take both of them down if she wanted. Years of training, combat, survival. But she had to be smart. She had to play their game. For now, she slowly turned around, hands behind her back. The cold steel of the cuffs bit into her wrists as Barrett clicked them into place. They shoved her toward the patrol car, her own badge still in Whitmore's hand. He hadn't even looked at it. Then Whitmore leaned in close, voice low and smug. "Welcome to Wilkins County, sweetheart." But they had no idea who they were dealing with. The back seat of a patrol car was nothing new to Monica. She'd sat in plenty over the years, but never like this. Hands cuffed, legs cramped, watching 2 corrupt officers pat each other on the back like they just made the biggest bust of their career. Outside, Whitmore popped the trunk of her Charger. He whistled low, then turned to Barrett with a smirk. Well, look at what we got here." Barrett strutted over like he already knew what he'd find. "That's a damn shame." Monica didn't have to see it. She knew. Drug planted, of course. Probably meth or fentanyl. Something easy to justify. Something that would stick. Whitmore pulled out a vacuum-sealed brick and held it up. "You were saying something about being a federal agent." Barrett shook his head, grinning. "Ain't that funny? Looks like we got ourselves a trafficker instead." Monica's fingers curled into fists behind her back. This wasn't sloppiness. It was routine. They'd done this before. Pick a target, plant the evidence, let the system swallow them whole. She kept her breathing steady. This wasn't her first time being outnumbered. Whitmore sauntered toward the car, arms resting on the window frame, as he peered inside. Now, you had a badge. Sure, but I ain't ever heard of a DEA agent running kilos through my county. Ain't that right, Cole? Barrett chuckled. She thought flashing a fake badge was gonna save her. Monica's lips barely moved. Read the damn badge, genius. Whitmore smirked. Oh, I read it. Real or not, it don't matter. 'Cause guess what? In about 24 hours, that fancy DEA title ain't gonna mean a damn thing. She tilted her head, watching him. That right? Oh yeah, Whitmore said. Once we get this booked, once your face is plastered all over the news, no one's gonna give a damn who you say you are. You're just another criminal. And in this town, sweetheart, you don't get to win. Monica's stomach tightened, not with fear but with rage. They really thought they could bury her, that no one would come looking, that she was just another face, another victim. She smiled, just a little, enough to make Whitmore pause. You think this is funny? Monica's voice was calm, deliberate. I think you're an idiot. Whitmore's expression flickered. A crack. Barrett yanked the door open. That's enough. Get her out. The cuffs dug into her wrists as they pulled her from the car. The parking lot outside the Wilkins County Sheriff's Office was mostly empty, except for a few other squad cars. The building itself was small, one of those backward stations, where things just disappeared. People, paperwork, entire cases. Whitmore shoved her forward. Let's go inside. The air was stale, thick with the smell of burnt coffee and cheap aftershave. A grizzled desk sergeant glanced up as they entered, barely raising an eyebrow. What's this? Trafficker, Barrett said, sliding Monica's badge across the counter. Fake DEA credential. The sergeant picked it up, squinted at it. Huh, booking her in now, Whitmore added. The sergeant exhaled, clearly uninterested. Put her in holding too. Whitmore grabbed Monica's elbow, guiding her toward a hallway lined with holding cells. The walls were cinder block, cold and unforgiving. He leaned in close. This is where you start thinking about how bad you just messed up. She didn't blink. I'm not the one who messed up. Whitmore grinned. We'll see about that. The cell door clanged shut. Monica sat on the metal bench, rolling her shoulders. She wasn't worried about getting out. That was inevitable. No, what she was thinking about was how to make them pay. But first, she had to let them dig their own graves a little deep. Monica sat on the cold metal bench, her back straight, her expression unreadable. The concrete walls around her were stained with time, the air thick with old sweat and bad decisions. She'd been in places like this before, but never on the wrong side of the bar. Across the cell, a young black man in his early 20s sat on the floor, knees drawn up, his head resting against the wall. He glanced at her, eyes cautious. You knew? He asked. Monica smirked. Something like that. He nodded, rubbing at a fresh bruise on his cheek. Let me guess, Whitmore and Barrett? She didn't answer. Didn't need to. The young man chuckled bitterly. Yeah, they got me too. Monica tilted her head. For what? He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You name it. Said my taillight was out. Pulled me over. Then suddenly I had a suspicious amount of cash on me. He scoffed. I work at a damn warehouse. Been saving up for months. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Funny thing is, by the time we got here, that cash was gone. Monica's jaw clenched. So this was routine. Whitmore and Barrett weren't just dirty. They were predators, hunting people they knew couldn't fight back. She leaned forward slightly. How long you been in here? 3 days, he muttered. No call, no lawyer. My mom don't even know where I'm. Monica's pulse ticked up. 3 days. Long enough for things to get lost in the system. She was done waiting. Standing up, she stretched her shoulders, rolling out the tension. The cuffs were gone now. Small victory, but she was still locked in a cell, and that wouldn't do. She took a step toward the thick iron bars and glanced toward the front desk. A single deputy sat there, flipping through paperwork, barely paying attention. Then she heard the familiar heavy footsteps of Whitmore and Barrett approaching. The young man beside her tensed. Here we go. Whitmore stopped in front of the bars, grinning like a man who thought he'd already won. He tapped the metal with his knuckle. How's it feel, sweetheart? Monica met his gaze. Calm, like a joke. Barrett chuckled. Oh, it's real. Real enough that you ain't leaving anytime soon. Monica tilted her head. You sure about that? Whitmore crossed his arms. Listen, I get it. You thought flashing that badge was gonna mean something, but this ain't the big city. Around here, we run things. No feds, no fancy lawyers, no backup, just us. Monica took a slow step forward, her voice even. That's so. Whitmore grinned. That's so. She exhaled, shaking her head slightly. Amateurs, I'll give you one last chance, she said. Walk back in here, unlock this door, and pretend this never happened. Whitmore let out a loud mocking laugh. Barrett joined in, shaking his head. You got some nerve, Whitmore said. Monica smirked. No, I got jurisdiction. Then outside the station, the sound of screeching tires cut through the air. Whitmore's radio crackled. Sheriff, we got federal agents at the front entrance. They're asking for a Monica Trenton. Whitmore's grin vanished. Monica stepped closer to the bars, tilting her head. You were saying? Barrett grabbed his radio. Who the hell called the Fed? Monica gave them both a knowing smile. I didn't have to. Whitmore whirled on her, his face twisted in frustration. You. But before he could finish, the front door of the station slammed open. Boots on tile. Loud. Purposeful. Then came the voice. Where the hell is my agent? Whitmore and Barrett froze. Monica. She just smiled. And just like that, the game was over. The metal doors of the holding cell swung open with a loud echoing creak. Monica stepped forward, rolling out the stiffness in her shoulders, as a tall black man in a tailored suit stood waiting. Deputy Director Raymond Holt, DEA, a man who rarely left his office, unless it was something personal. He looked Monica over, then turned to Whitmore and Barrett, his expression unreadable. Uncuff her. Neither officer moved. Holt's gaze sharpened. I said uncuff her. No. Barrett hesitated. Sir, she was caught with you planted it. Holt's tone cut through the air like a blade. Whitmore's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since this started, he looked uncertain. The power had shifted. A U.S. Marshal stepped forward, badge glinting. We're escorting her to court now. If either of you obstructs that, I'll be adding to your charges. Barrett turned red. Charges? What the hell are you talking about? Holt folded his arms. Let me spell it out for you. You illegally detained a federal agent, falsified evidence, and violated her constitutional rights. You two morons are looking at felony charges before the day is over. Whitmore's jaw tightened. This is a mistake. Holt smirked. Oh, I agree. The mistake was thinking you could get away with it. With a metallic clink, Monica's cuffs came off. She rubbed her wrists, giving Whitmore a long, slow look before stepping past him without another word. But she wasn't done with him yet. Monica sat at the defendant's table, calm, composed, waiting. The courtroom smelled like old wood and bad coffee, the kind of place where people like Whitmore and Barrett thought they were untouchable. Across the room, the two officers sat with their lawyer, a local defense attorney who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The judge, an older man with silver hair and a no-nonsense expression, cleared his throat. Let's begin. The prosecutor stood first, straightening his tie. Your Honor, the state has charged Miss Trenton with drug trafficking, possession with intent to distribute, and resisting arrest. Monica barely reacted. She wanted them to feel comfortable, to believe for just a second longer that they were in control. Then the judge turned to her. Miss Trenton, do you have legal representation? Monica leaned forward. That won't be necessary, Your Honor. A murmur rippled through the room. The prosecutor frowned. The judge nodded. Very well. How do you plead? Monica smiled. Before I answer that, Your Honor, I'd like to present something to the court. She reached into the file folder in front of her and pulled out a laminated. She stood, walking it over to the bailiff, who passed it up to the judge. The judge studied it, then his eyebrows lifted. The prosecutor leaned forward, confused. What is that? The judge set the ID down with a sigh. Then he looked at Whitmore and Barrett. His expression shifted. This is a federal badge. He turned to the officers. Miss Trenton is a special agent with the DEA. The courtroom fell silent. Whitmore and Barrett's faces drained of color. Monica's voice was smooth. That's correct, Your Honor. And if the prosecution wants to continue pressing charges against a federal agent who was framed by two corrupt officers, I'll be happy to proceed. The prosecutor's face twisted. Your Honor, The judge cut him off with a raised hand. He looked at the officer. Would you two like to explain yourselves? Whitmore shifted in his seat. Your Honor, we were acting on probable cause. Monica laughed. A sharp, biting sound. Probable cause? You had nothing. You pulled me over because you thought you could get away with it. The judge's expression hardened. He turned to the prosecutor. I assume you'll be dropping all charges. The prosecutor, looking sick, nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Good. The judge turned back to Monica. Agent Trenton, you're free to go. She didn't sit back down. Instead, she turned to Whitmore and Barrett. Now let's talk about what happens to dirty cops who frame innocent people. But this time, they wouldn't be walking away. Whitmore and Barrett sat stiffly, their hands gripping the edges of the table as if the wood might keep them from sinking. The color had drained from their faces, their arrogance replaced by something Monica had seen before. Fear. The judge adjusted his glasses, peering down at them. Officers, this court takes allegations of corruption very seriously. His voice was firm, steady, the kind of voice that made men sweat. Monica turned to face them fully, arms crossed. She had them exactly where she wanted. She took a slow step forward, her voice calm, controlled. Let's go over what happened, shall we? Whitmore's jaw twitched, but he said nothing. You pulled me over for a non-existent stop sign, she continued. Claimed I fit a description. Then you planted drugs in my trunk and thought no one would come looking when you booked me under a false name. She tilted her head. Did I miss anything? The courtroom was dead silent. Barrett opened his mouth, but Monica didn't let him speak. No. Wait. I did miss something. She reached into the file folder on the prosecutor's desk. Turns out you two aren't just bad cops. You're stupid one. She held up a printed bank statement. The FBI ran an emergency audit of both your accounts. The moment I called in, she said, her voice like a blade. And guess what? Your checking accounts tell a pretty little story. Big deposits too big for small-town police salary. Thousands of dollars coming in at regular intervals. All from shell companies linked to drug operations. The prosecutor snatched the papers from her hand, eyes widening as he read. Monica turned back to the officers. You weren't just framing people, you were getting paid to do it. The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed his gavel down. Order! Order in the court! Whitmore shot out of his seat. This is nonsense. There's no proof. Monica raised an eyebrow. No proof? Funny. Because my department has wire transfers, phone records, even surveillance footage of Barrett here meeting with known traffickers. Barrett paled. That's a lie. Monica turned, motioning toward the entrance. The doors swung open. A U.S. Marshal stepped inside, followed by two men in suits. The lead agent, Special Investigator Troy Dawson, held up a sealed warrant. Judge, we have federal arrest warrants for officers Ryan Whitmore and Cole Barrett on charges of conspiracy, evidence tampering, and multiple counts of civil rights violations. Whitmore staggered back. You set us up. Monica laughed. You set yourselves up. Barrett shot to his feet. You can't do this. The marshal stepped forward, handcuffs already out. Actually, we can. Whitmore lunged toward the door. He didn't get far. Two deputies intercepted him, shoving him face first against the courtroom table. His own cuffs clicked shut around his wrist. Barrett stood frozen, staring at Monica. His hands shook. The marshal grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back. Cole Barrett, you're under arrest. As the two disgraced officers were dragged away, Monica exhaled slowly. Justice was a long game, but today she'd won. But there was still one last thing to do. The courtroom emptied quickly after the spectacle of two corrupt officers being led out in cuffs. The prosecutor sat slumped at his desk, rubbing his temples, probably wondering how his case had collapsed so fast. The judge had already left, and now it was just Monica, Deputy Director Holt, and a handful of federal agents standing in the near-silent room. Holt turned to Monica, arms crossed. You good? She nodded. Yeah, he exhaled. I figured something was off when you didn't check in after court yesterday. When the station refused to confirm your arrest, I knew we had a problem. Monica smirked. Appreciate the cavalry. Holt gave her a look. You're lucky you're not in deeper trouble. You should have identified yourself the second they put cuffs on you. Monica shrugged. Wouldn't have mattered. They were never going to check. Holt ran a hand down his face, shaking his head. You always do things the hard way. Hard way gets results. Holt let out a dry chuckle. Can't argue with that. The doors swung open again, and the young man from Monica's holding cell, the warehouse worker who'd been locked up for days with no phone call, stepped inside, escorted by a federal agent. His eyes darted between Monica and Holt. They said I'm free to go. Holt nodded. All charges dropped. Your record will be cleared. The young man let out a breath, his relief visible. But then his expression shifted, something harder, something wary. What about them? Monica understood the question. Whitmore and Barrett, he nodded. She met his gaze, steady. They're done, he swallowed, nodding. Good. A pause. Then quieter. This happens a lot, don't it? Monica didn't lie to him. Yeah, it does. His shoulders tensed, hands curling into fists at his sides. But not today, she said. Today they lost. That seemed to settle something in him. He gave her a small nod, then turned to leave. But before stepping out, he paused. Thanks, he muttered. Monica watched as he disappeared down the hall. He shouldn't have had to thank her. He should have never been in that position in the first place. Holt clapped a hand on her shoulder. Come on, let's get you out of here. But before she could move, the prosecutor's voice cut through the room. Agent Trenton. She turned to see him standing there, his face still pale. He hesitated, then exhaled. You're lucky we found out who you were before trial, he admitted. If this had gone any further. Monica raised an eyebrow. I'm not the one who got lucky today, he blinked. She stepped closer, her voice low and sharp. You didn't ask questions when they brought me in. You took their word, filed the charges, and let me rot in a cell. How many others have you done that to? The prosecutor stiffened. I'm not looking for an answer. She studied him. But you should be. His gaze dropped. He had nothing to say to that. Monica didn't wait for a response. She turned, walking toward the doors, Holt following. As they stepped outside, the Georgia sun was setting, streaking the sky in deep oranges and purples. A warm breeze carried the scent of pine through the air. Monica breathed it in. Holt nudged her. You ready to go? She gave a small smile. Yeah, she had work to do. Because this wasn't just a win, it was a warning. And people like Whitmore and Barrett, they weren't the only ones who needed to hear it. Monica stepped out of the courthouse, the last traces of daylight fading behind the trees. The air smelled cleaner out here. Freedom had a scent, and she wasn't about to take it for granted. Holt walked beside her, hands in his pockets, his usual no-nonsense expression softening just a bit. They'll be in federal custody by the morning, he said. Prosecutors' offices scrambling, trying to distance themselves from the mess. Monica smirked. They should be. This isn't just two dirty cops. It's an entire system that let them get away with it. Holt sighed, shaking his head. You know this won't be the last time we see this. Yeah, Monica admitted. But today we put two away. A few feet ahead, a small group had gathered near the courthouse steps. Local people who had likely dealt with Whitmore and Barrett before, and never thought they'd see them taken down. Among them was the young warehouse worker from the holding cell. He stood off to the side, hands shoved in his pockets, watching. When their eyes met, he gave her a short nod. Respect, gratitude, maybe even hope. That was enough. As Monica turned toward Holt's black SUV, he shot her a knowing glance. So, he said, unlocking the doors. What's next for you? Monica slid into the passenger seat, stretching out her sore wrists. The usual. Holt chuckled as he started the engine. Which is? She leaned back, eyes drifting toward the courthouse in the rearview mirror. Making sure the next Whitmore and Barrett think twice before trying this again. Some people think power protects them, that the right badge, the right connections, the right system will shield them from consequences. But justice has a way of catching up. Whitmore and Barrett, they weren't special. They were just two more names added to a long list of people who thought they could get away with it. Until they didn't. Monica knew this fight wasn't over. There were more out there. More who would abuse the system. More who believed they were untouchable. But that didn't matter, because every time they fell it sent a message. No one is above the law. And for those who thought otherwise, they'd find out soon enough. The story of Monica Trenton's relentless pursuit of justice, in the face of corruption, carries a powerful lesson that can be applied to real life. Never assume that power equals immunity, and never stay silent in the face of injustice. Whether in our personal lives, workplaces, or society as a whole, there will always be those who misuse their authority, believing that they can manipulate the system without consequence. The key takeaway from Monica's journey is the importance of persistence, strategy, and courage in holding those in power accountable. One of the most striking lessons is the value of patience and calculated action. Monica didn't lash out emotionally when she was arrested under false charges. She stayed calm, observed her surroundings, and played the long game. In life, we often face situations where reacting impulsively can make matters worse. Whether dealing with unfair treatment at work, legal disputes, or personal betrayals, it's important to take a step back, gather facts, and let those who think they are untouchable dig their own graves. When you have the truth on your side, patience becomes your greatest weapon. The story also emphasizes the power of preparation and alliances. Monica didn't face the corrupt officers alone. Her network of federal agents, investigators, and legal experts ensured that justice was served. In real life, this translates to the importance of building strong relationships with people who uphold integrity. Whether it's having mentors in your profession, trusted friends in personal matters, or seeking legal protection in difficult situations, surrounding yourself with the right people can mean the difference between being victimized and reclaiming your power. Another key lesson is that systems don't change unless people demand accountability. The prosecutor in the story was complacent. He never questioned the officer's claims until he was forced. This is a reminder that injustice persists when people are too passive or afraid to challenge the status quo. If you see corruption or unfair treatment happening, whether it's in your workplace, local government, or even among acquaintances, it's crucial to ask questions, demand evidence, and refuse to be silent. Truth may not always come to light immediately, but every voice that speaks out weakens the foundation of corruption. Lastly, Monica's victory reminds us that justice is a long game, but persistence leads to change. She knew that taking down Whitmore and Barrett wouldn't fix the entire system, but it would send a message. In life, whether you're fighting against workplace discrimination, social injustice, or personal struggles, it's important to celebrate small wins while keeping your eyes on the bigger picture. Corrupt individuals, like Whitmore and Barrett, may believe they are above consequences, but history has proven that no one stays untouchable forever. If there's anything to take away from this story, it's that you should stand firm in truth, be patient but persistent, build strong alliances, and never let fear silence you. The world needs more people like Monica, people who refuse to let injustice win.